You've always heard the same story about rich people. They won the lottery. They got in early on crypto. They inherited it or someone backed them. Look, basically, something that happens to other people. But wealth isn't an accident. It's predictable. It shows up in what you do long before it shows up in a bank account, because the account is always the last thing to change. You become rich twice. First, in how you think, then later in the number. Right now, if you're sitting at a desk at 9:15 a.m. with a lukewarm coffee next to your keyboard, looking at a spreadsheet or an inbox that doesn't belong to you, it feels like you're trapped. But if you recognize these five psychological shifts happening inside you right now, you aren't just an employee putting in hours. You are someone operating on a completely different timeline. Sign 1. You resent the safety, not the work. Sign. Number 1. You've stopped craving the illusion of corporate security. Think about how the modern system is designed. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, a specific number lands in your account. Let's say it's $3,500. Your brain is supposed to register that number as peace of mind. It covers the rent, it buys the groceries, and it leaves just enough for a dinner out on Friday night. In the corporate world, they call this stability. But to a mind destined for wealth, that automatic deposit doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like a bribe. It's the price your company pays you to forget your own dreams and build theirs instead. You look across the room at coworkers who have been in the same cubicle for 6 years, completely satisfied with a 3% annual merit raise. You find it hard to join their celebration, not because you judge them, but because you've realized that a base salary isn't a financial floor. It's a financial ceiling. When fixed safety starts making you feel claustrophobic rather than comfortable, it's the first sign your mind has outgrown the cage. Sign 2. You trade input for output, the shift to leverage. Sign number 2. You've stopped measuring your worth in hours. An average employee thinks linearly. I gave them 8 hours today, so I deserve 8 hours of pay. They clock in at 9, clock out at 5, and view money as a direct exchange for their physical presence. But your mind doesn't work that way anymore. You've started realizing the sheer inefficiency of the corporate structure. When you build a template, write a piece of code, or optimize a system that turns a 3-hour task into a 3-minute process, you don't celebrate having more time to slack off. You feel an inner frustration that the company reaps the rewards of your efficiency while your pay stays exactly the same. You're no longer focused on simply working hard. You're obsessed with leverage. You understand that labor has an expiration date, but systems, digital assets, and scalable processes work while you sleep. If you look at your daily tasks not as a checklist to survive the day, but as a framework to understand how scale actually works, you've already graduated from the employee mindset. Sign 3. The micro expense shift. Sign number 3. You've stopped playing defense and started playing offense. Modern financial media loves to sell a massive lie. Cut your way to $1 million. They want you to spend hours clipping digital coupons, agonizing over a $6 Starbucks latte, or calculating how much you'd have in 40 years if you never bought a nice sandwich. This is the scarcity mindset, a psychological state where you treat money like a shield to hide behind because you're terrified it's going to run out. But you've stopped trying to optimize the wrong side of the equation. You look at your financial life and recognize a harsh truth. Your expenses have a hard floor. You can't negotiate your rent to zero. You can't buy groceries for pennies. There is a limit to how much you can cut, but there is absolutely no ceiling on how much you can earn. When you open your calculator app late at night, you aren't looking for subscriptions to cancel. You're looking at how to allocate the $500 you saved to buy a skill, build a side gig, or purchase an index fund. You stop treating money as a shield and start treating it as a weapon. Sign 4. You outgrew the break room. Gossip sign. Number 4. You are quietly auditing your inner circle. If you walk into the office break room on any given Tuesday, you'll hear the same background noise. People complaining about the upper management, discussing the latest reality TV show, or bragging about the new truck they just leased on an 84-month term. You see people like Whitney from marketing holding out her wrist to show off a new designer bag that cost her $10,000, while you happen to know from a conversation last quarter that her credit cards are quietly compounding at 22% interest. You used to sit at those tables and nod along just to keep the peace. Now, that conversation feels heavy. It feels small. Instead, when you talk to someone who mentions they just closed on their first duplex, or that they spent their weekend researching high-yield index funds, you notice yourself leaning in. You don't announce that you're cutting people off. That's not how the real world works. But you quietly stop sharing your ambitions with people who change the subject back to their fantasy football league. You stop looking for validation from people who are content with staying exactly where they are. Sign 5. You feed the asset, not the ego. Sign number 5. You invest in reality, not the image. The moment a typical employee gets a bonus, a tax refund, or a small promotion, their immediate instinct is to look rich. They upgrade the car, buy the latest iPhone, or book a luxury vacation they can barely afford, all to prove to strangers on the internet that they are succeeding. They spend their capital feeding an ego that will never be full. But you have developed a different kind of discipline. When you have extra cash, you don't spend it on depreciating liabilities built to be looked at. You quietly drop it into a brokerage account, an automated index fund, or an online certification that increases your market value. Your friends might look at your modest car or your lack of designer logos and assume you aren't doing well. Let them. You understand the difference between looking rich and being wealthy. You've set up that automatic $50 or $100 transfer every single payday. The number might be modest right now, but the framework behind it is identical to how multimillionaires operate. You are buying freedom, while everyone else is buying a lease on status.